Sprint planning is a very important event for the team. It is that time when the team get to come together. Now, they typically would have done a backlog refinement session, so the team have a fair understanding of the work that is coming in. Now, in the sprint planning, the outcome of the sprint planning is they should be able to commit to that work. They should be able to give the sizes, the sizing. By sizing, we're talking about the estimation. Typically, for some teams that are not very mature with agile, they typically go with the t-shirt sizing, small, medium, large, or in some cases they go with the sizes of, and it's called the affinity sizing, where they use different kinds of animals to compare each other. As an example, is this a mouse? Typically, a very small story. Is this a tiger or a lion? Which is more like a medium story in comparison to the mouse. Is this in some cases, some teams use mouse, dog, tiger, elephant, where they say an elephant is like a teen story, which is huge. A medium story or a huge medium story is like a lion that is bigger than a dog. A small medium story is like a dog. So using that affinity between, the mouse and the dog and the tiger, they tend to kind of have a fair understanding of the effort that is required to actually complete that piece of work. Long and short of it is they use those kinds of techniques to size their stories. Some teams use the Fibonacci sequence. Well, they've advanced, their understanding of agile, and they have a fair understanding of how the Fibonacci sequence works. At a high level, the Fibonacci sequence is that series of numbers. It's a mathematical series of numbers that is used in and readily available in nature. For example, in flowers, it's there. You see those shapes basically, and you can. The Fibonacci sequence is, for those of you who are history buffs, it's actually a mathematician, an Italian mathematician by name Fibonacci, that came up with this sequence. After observing that this is commonly available in nature. For example, the coral of seashells in plants, and they were like, if this is going through this sequence, which is 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and then 5, and then 7. If it's going through this sequence, basically it's a recurring sequence. And so typically for work, it is used for sequence, it's used for sizing work in a way where we can actually be able to look back at that work and get some data, what we refer to as empirical data, which would help us to know, for example, how the team is maturing in their estimation. I'd like you to bear this in mind when we talk about the topic of estimation. All estimates are wrong. What that means is the teams would only know how they are truly sizing their work with time, typically 6 sprints, when they have been able to, guess, try, meaning they guess, as an example, to say, hey, this work is going to take this much to complete, and then they try, which is they execute the sprint. Now, when they execute the sprint and they did not, what they committed to versus what they actually completed, if there is a disparity, then the next time they adjust their estimation, to match closely to what they delivered in the last sprint. And they go through this process over and over again until they get to that point where that sweet spot where they understand what they truly are capable of delivering, and then stick to that number and improve on that number over time. Basically, that's how the estimates work at a high level. So back to the story. The sprint planning is that situation where, that event where the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the development team come together. They probably have done a sprint backlog refinement, so they have a fair understanding of the work. Now, when they meet during the sprint planning, they are having a better conversation around what are the outcomes they are trying to drive, what's the sprint goal, and what are the dependencies within the work. Are they dependent amongst themselves, which are what we refer to as intra-team dependencies? Are they dependent on other teams, which are inter-team dependencies? Now, those kinds of good conversations happen within the sprint planning. And then after they've been able to identify that, then a team understands or attempt to understand the acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria writing is an art in itself. What that means is the acceptance criteria, which shows that, hey, if this is the work, how do I know that this work is going to be complete? How do I know that this work is complete? So we list certain criteria. Okay, you will do this, you will do this will be tested, this will be verified, this will be. When we do that, typically it helps the person who is doing the work to know, oh, this is when it's complete. So I can send this work to the product owner to review. So the acceptance criteria, there are certain best practices around acceptance criteria writing, which I don't want to go into in this video. But at a high level, acceptance criteria must be, testable, which is we should be able to know if the acceptance criteria has been met with a yes or a no. So when the team is reviewing the sprint goal with the product owner, having a good understanding of the story, reviewing the acceptance criteria, developing their stories, that or task that is going to help build that or complete that story, then when they've been able to see that all of this basically aligns, then they proceed with estimating, which is what is this real effort that is required to complete this work. And like I said previously, they use either the T-shirt, they use Affinity, or they use the Fibonacci. Whatever they choose, if they are using the Fibonacci, for example, they are looking at they are using a planning poker technique, which is readily available online. They download the application, they use it, or in some cases, it is a plugin on Jira, which is a very popular ALM or application lifecycle monitoring tool or management tool. They would do the Fibonacci sequence, put in the estimate or the level of estimate, and voila, that user story is done. Typically, with some teams, especially if they've done this over and over again and have some level of maturity, this typically takes 5 minutes, 6 minutes max to go through what is the story. Are we cool with the acceptance criteria? Do we have any dependency with other teams on this story so that we can tie that dependency on the back end between team A and team B on Jira? And what's the level of effort required for this story? And then the team does this very quickly and they move on to the next. So if they go through this process of spending about 5 minutes, typically if they have like 20 stories to estimate, before the sprint starts, typically at 5 minutes, 60 minutes, basically, they will go through about 12 stories. So in about 2 hours, they would have gone through about 20 stories with some change. They are going to have a few more minutes, basically, to go through what we refer to as commitments. So again, in a typical sprint planning, the outcomes are what we refer to as the 3 C's: the card, the conversation, the commitment. The card, the product owner reviews with the team what the work is. By card, we're referring to the user story. The story, the acceptance criteria, and all of that is the card. The conversation typically happens when the teams are asked to estimate. Now, the estimation is a different conversation, but at a high level, the team goes back and forth where this person says this is an 8, this person says this is a 3, and both of them get to have a conversation as to why. I'll be creating another video that discusses estimation in detail so you can really understand it. But typically, going back to the 3 C's, card, conversation, and then a commitment. The commitment basically is after understanding all the stories, the teams are very comfortable to say, we understand the work that is going into that sprint and we are ready to commit. When they commit, basically, that closes the process. And that is sprint planning in a nutshell. Typically, the folks that come out of that session have a good understanding of what needs to be done. They are ready to commit to that work because they understand the acceptance criteria, the user story, they understand the interdependencies and intra-team dependencies, and they understand the level of effort that goes in. They have that confidence that they are going to be able to do it, and voila, the sprint starts. Starting the sprints typically mean the product owner or the scrum master, in most cases, hits on, boom, sprint start button.